Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. If you really want to at least get closer to what a person thinks, listen to what exactly that person has to say. And if that person matches his words with his actions, that builds trust. So, Vladimir Putin went and had a little 3 hours conversation or had a little speech at the Valdai Policy Forum in Sochi, in Russia. And he got questioned and he told whatever he thinks about the geopolitics, the world, Russia, the war in Ukraine, the United States of America, paper tiger claims. What will Russia do if the Americans use Tomahawk missiles in Russia? Not the Ukrainians, the Americans, and many more. I have here the most interesting, I think, highlights of Vladimir Putin's speech and answers. Let's start with the first statement coming from Putin. Now, it does not mean that what he says is true, entirely true, or they are lies. But you have some information that you can get from many sources nowadays, and you can compare, and you can contrast, or you can judge for yourselves. So let's start with the first one. First claim coming from Vladimir Putin. All right, this is from 8 hours ago today on the 2nd of October 2025. Russian troops advancing along entire combat line. Putin claims. Russian troops are confidently advancing along the entire line of contact, Russian President Vladimir Putin said at a meeting on Valdai International Discussion Club. So here is a map of Ukraine, and Vladimir Putin says that the Russians are advancing along the entire line of contact. Now, between you and I don't think anything moves in Kherson right here. I don't think anything happens here. I don't think the Russians have been advancing maybe an inch or two right here in this delta and right here. That's all. That's all. But nothing major. In Zaporizhzhia, it is true. They are advancing big time right here. In Donetsk, it is true. They advance here even in Dnipropetrovsk. It is true. And they are advancing everywhere by Pokrovsk, which I thought it already is done, but they are advancing nevertheless. You go right here in Liman area, the Russians are advancing. Then you have here, this is Kharkov. They are advancing in Kupiansk, they take over Kupiansk. Pretty soon they are in the center of the town. So Putin is really, telling the truth on this one. And not only that he's saying that, but right here coming from the Ukrainians. And this is from Ukrainska Pravda. Russians occupied 3 villages in Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia oblasts. Well, these are just the way the location I showed you right here. This is the area and where the Russians clearly advance here. Okay, let's see what Putin has to say. This means, and I'm quoting, that our troops are confidently advancing along practically, I don't like when you put that thing, practically, that means it's not entirely true, or qualifies, the entire line of contact. All right, this is what he says. Next one. We found this one on Ukrainska Pravda, and we have this one where we have a lot of topics, questions, answers, and just statements coming from Putin. Russia Today. This video right here is 3 hours and 52 minutes right there. I'm not going to play it for you, obviously, but I'm going to put a link in the description box below with Russia Today. And if you want to do it at your own time, you can watch it. I, watched part of it and I looked at the most important issues, which is Trump's paper tiger remark possibly misunderstood, Putin says. This according to Russians. The US president may have used the term ironically in describing Russia. That's what he said. And he said, no, we have our own relations. We know what gifts to present each other. I don't know the context in which this comment was made. Maybe it was made ironically. And this is what he says if you look into the Ukrainska Pravda. Putin responds to Trump's paper tiger. Now, for me personally, this is a non-issue. Just so you know, it's a non-issue what Trump says about this kind of BS. He just tries to get you off balance. And in judo, that is the main thing. Get the person off balance and then you use his momentum. All right? That's what it is. And Aikido the same way, even though Aikido is okay. But nevertheless, Putin has a black belt in judo, legitimate black belt, not like given by, I don't know, Miyamoto Musashi something. Okay, or Hirohito, or Akihito, or Balahito, or Judohito. No, all right? So let's see what he says right here. I mentioned this because in this context, Putin is gonna, as he is, he's gonna issue a threat. I super dare you, Trump. That's what he says right here. He says, Kremlin leader Putin has responded to US President Donald Trump, who called Russia a paper tiger, by telling Trump to go deal with it. That means go and play with the little paper tiger. And again, what happened here? He said Putin stated that he reacts to such remarks calmly, but suggests that Trump should go and deal with the paper tiger. And this is what he says. We are fighting the whole thing. We fight not only Ukraine, we fight the entire NATO. All right. Putin claimed that Russia could not be considered a paper tiger because it is, and I'm quoting, effectively fighting against all the NATO countries, and it feels confident. Where is the lie? There's no lie. Russia is fighting the entire NATO. Maybe with the exception of Slovakia and Hungary, but even they help, I think, with humanitarian aid and also on Ukraine. So they're involved, not as others like the Poles or the Baltic states or the Americans, the Brits, the French, the Germans, and so on. They are not Canadians. All right, 40 million people. Pooh. All right, out of which 10 million are foreigners. Very loyal foreigners. Very loyal. You got 1 in 4 in Canada. 1 in 4 in Canada, I think, immigrants. So they are very loyal. How many spies and how many agents are among those guys? Who the hell knows? Canada is going to be owned pretty soon by China or India. Which one gets at it first? You don't like it? Deal with it, as he says. All right, and indeed fights in the entire NATO. All right, that's the first thing right here. Let's go to the second one with the paper tiger, right? That's why I covered it. Putin hails bravery of U.S. national who died fighting for Russia. Okay, this is just a punch under the belt. Next one. Putin compares ideology of modern West to USSR. You know why? Because the same guys who were in charge of the USSR and making the propaganda and all the be quiet, no freedom of speech, and the Katyn forest in Poland are the ones that are in charge of the modern West right now. I dare you, go and look for their names. And their names and their education, and maybe sometimes, okay, they tell you who they are. Got that? If you don't got that, then you gon' got that. And they moved from Soviet Union. They were kicked out by Putin from Russia in 2006, about 2006, and they have been in Europe. That's why in Europe you have people calling for freedom of speech to be infringed. Close this account, close that. Don't criticize that, because if you criticize that, you're called anti-this and anti-that. That is the same tactic. Remember, the enemy of the Soviet people. Right here. The Soviet Union imposed its system on others, and it didn't last. The president reminded. He talks about something else, obviously. All right. Russian President Vladimir Putin has drawn a parallel between the Soviet Union and the present-day US and EU, accusing them of imposing their own political system on other countries. Speaking at the plenary session, paka, and I'm quoting, the Soviet Union once erred by imposing its system. Then the United States has taken up that baton. The EU has also distinguished itself. A nation that respects its own tradition as a rule does not encroach on the traditions of others. Well, he goes like that, but this is not something that is just new. The Americans and the British, or the Brits because they were first, and then the Americans and the French, they colonized the world. That means they took over way before Soviet Union was in place. Okay, if you really want to go by their mentality. The mentality was, I'm stronger and I'm going to get your land, your resources. Not because they were particularly evil, as these guys, the same propaganda and the professors tell you. Not because they were particularly evil belonging to a group, it's because they had the power. And you know what? Because they could. Because others did the same thing to others whenever they could. Look at Genghis Khan. He plundered everywhere. Look at Attila the Hun. These are not Europeans, by the way. None of them are white. Okay? If you want, go to China. Do you think how is China so great? How did it get formed? Just they got together like friends or something. Look how Portugal built Brazil, if you want. Brazil is not only that, my friends. If they can, they take over the next door neighbor. That's the point. It's not like, oh, we live in peace and so on. It's not only a particularity of a certain group. The American Indians, the Indians that crossed over the Bering Straits and came to America, remember those American Indians genetically from Asia? When they came here, they fought with one another, they exterminated one another. The tribes, ask the Cherokees, the beautiful Cherokees and others who are in, not only now, look at their history. Not history, because they don't have a history, because history means written language. Right? Look at, I'm talking about the North Americans. I'm not talking about the Inca or, no, just stick with these guys. Even those guys were a little bit like, I'm going to queue up. They were warring people. They were like, oh my God, they're so peaceful, nature, mother nature, like as these imbeciles are dreaming. So remember, you try to impose on others, if you have the power, they're all going to do that. Putin accuses Europe of gender, quote-unquote, terrorism. Many people decide to move to Russia to protect their children, the Russian president has said. Many people in Western Europe are dissatisfied with the gender terrorism against children taking root there and are moving to Russia to escape it. People are relocating not so much for political reasons, but rather values. And I'm quoting, gender terrorism against children does not suit very many people, and they look for safe havens coming to us. God willing, we will support them. All right? What can you do? In 2024, presidential decree allows citizens from 47 unfriendly countries who disagree with the ideological policies in their homelands to apply for temporary residence in Russia, through a simplified procedure. Russia has been promoting traditional values, I would say healthy values, and biological values. Go and look in the animal reign and you tell me when you see pig or pock. You tell me. Now, I know in college in the United States of America, this is how those smart Frankfurt School followers try to deconstruct our civilization by telling us, have you seen that little pigeon jumping on the other pigeon? What? See? Yeah, how many do that? No, that's a special case reinforcing the general rule. General rule means normality. Outside of the general rule is the word perversion. From pervert. It's Roman, it's Latin. Okay? That means outside of norm. That's what is perversion. Perverting, changing, shifting the norm out of it. And these guys are trying to say, see, the general rule cannot apply. You can't. You have to be. They went with what was that? Cultural relativism. Go and check it out. That means, well, that culture is relatively good. You can't compare cultures. You can compare, I don't know, the symphony of, let's say, Ludwig van Beethoven with, I don't know, Tupac Shakur. They're the same. You can't. I mean, It's just different. You have that's it. With over there instruments over instruments over instruments in parallel, competing, going up and down and so on. It's more brain in that one than in akapaka makalaka. But hey, you can't say it. Yeah, I can. That's garbage. That's low level. That's like that. 86 IQ. That's all you need for that one. All right, let's move on. I'm going to tell too much today. This is what Putin says. Relax. Spread your legs and sleep well. Putin to the West. The idea that Russia is going to attack NATO is, quote unquote, inconceivable, the president has said. EU leaders keep repeating the nonsense mantra that Russia is going to attack NATO countries. And he says, honestly, all I want to say is relax, sleep well, or address your own issues. Inconceivable. Well, if you know anything, and you guys know because you're not baboons, otherwise you wouldn't be here after what minute 17. You wouldn't be here if you would be, so you know about geopolitics, about geography, about populations, about capabilities. You know there's no way, zero way if the Europeans and the Russians get at war on one another, like real war, in a conventional war, or you take the US being the main guy in NATO, Russia will not win, cannot win. It cannot win. You can have 5 pairs of balls as a Russian, you still 145 million people. The other guys are more than 450 million, just by number. By economies, the resources, you're going to get the resources. The Americans will provide you and make others provide you as well. You can't, technologically, you're not inferior. If there's no nuclear weapons, even if there's nuclear weapons, France has about 250 or 400 warheads, nuclear warheads. United States of America, the same kind. So the same amount. United States of America has like 3,000. England, that was Great Britain, 400 or something. So you can't win with either. You can't. Even if you want. I don't think the Russians want to do that. And this is something very important as a little veiled threat to everybody. Russia can't afford to be weak. Why? These guys are going to suck it dry of their resources as they did the Soviet Union. History has shown that being strong is the best security guarantee against foreign aggressors. And he says, our history has proven weakness is unacceptable as it creates temptation, illusion that some disagreement with us can be resolved through force. Putin also cautioned potential adversaries against provoking Russia, and that it has always ended badly for the instigator. And this is another truth that he says. Russia is vital to global order. Why? Balance. Let me tell you this. If we as human beings would not be tamed by laws and the certainty that the laws will be protected and implemented and enforced by a guy with guns, many people with guns, which is the police department and officers, we would do a lot of bad stuff. Why? Because we can. We prey on the weak. That's how we are. And we have all kind of feelings of tyranny. We suppress them. Well, I can talk about myself if you want. I suppress them because there will be negative consequences. But when you see a dictator there and there, it's because he is unchallenged. That's why he is doing that. Stalin. An example. Moses. Yeah, that Moses. An example. These are tyrants. These are criminals. Why? Nobody opposed them. Nobody dared to oppose. They had no competition. They had no, rather, global order. That means Russia needs to be a counterbalance to a tyrant. Two tyrants are counterbalancing themselves, one another. The goal is this or this. But eventually, it's a counterbalance. Soviet Union and United States of America was a counterbalance to one another. In God we trust. Supposedly, we don't care about God. Why? Because the guys in charge of Russia, which were non-Russians, like that a lot. Attempts to squeeze the country out of the global system have failed, and it cannot function without such a key player. That's correct, and I'm quoting. I think that those who have tried to destroy these links have become convinced of this. It has turned out that a very global system that some wanted to expel us from, to squeeze us out of, is simply not letting Russia go, because it needs Russia as a very significant part of the universal balance. If Russia is strong, if Russia is weak, they will squeeze you out in a second, my friends. So you're vital, all right? Ukraine is a tragedy, and it's true. The Ukraine tragedy is painful for both Ukrainians and Russians. It's painful for all of us. He accused Western Europe of continuing the whip up hysteria that war with the Russians is supposedly on the doorstep. Punitive measures against Russia have failed. The president noted that the country has the record for numbers of sanctions imposed on it. And I'm quoting, you know how much efforts our opponents have expended in recent years to push Russia out of the global system, to drive the same thing here, and to drive us into political culture and information isolation and economic autarky. I know what it is. There is no need to explain to anyone that these efforts have utterly failed. That is correct. This is what is going to be about the next subject. France claims to have detained Russian Shadow Fleet tanker. I covered this earlier today. The French with pistols over there, you see over there, armed. I said this is an act of piracy when I made this video earlier today. Piracy. And here is Putin accuses France of piracy. Why? They said in the media that I used, they say that this Shadow Fleet tanker was anchored off the coast of France. That's all the details. They didn't say it was in the territorial waters of France. They didn't tell us if it was in international waters. They said anchored off France coast to make it like the France had jurisdiction. I don't think they had, because if the tanker would have been in the France territorial waters, all the media in the West would say that they were in the territorial waters. This is the authority, legal authority for these guys to climb over. Well, Putin says that's not true. It was in international waters, and that's, I believe this guy, because otherwise the other guys would have told us, no, it was in the territorial. Nothing about territorial waters. That tells me they didn't want to say it. Paris has detained an oil tanker it claims to be part of Russian Shadow Fleet. This is what he says. Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced France's detention of an oil tanker that it claims carried Russian cargo as piracy, noting the seizure took place in neutral waters without jurisdiction. I said that. They always think about it. What are you gonna do about it? And this is what Putin said. Putin argued that investigators were searching for, and I'm quoting, military cargo, drones, or something of that kind, but insisted none, and I'm quoting, none of that is there, never was, and never could be. So what are you gonna do about it? The vessel question is Borakai. Russian from France in language of the riddles, Shadow Fleet, illegal secondary sanctions. Okay, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Now, imagine that, I don't know, should I consider that your vessel if it's my vessel? But let's say the Russians don't consider it their vessel. Because if they consider their vessel is like my child riding a bicycle and my neighbor sees my child with the bicycle. You know what will happen? You guess it. I'm going to go and fuck him up. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to call the police. I'm going to put the police afterwards. Or maybe the emergency services first, and then the police are going to be called. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just joking. All right, so I don't think he recognizes that's Russian or anything, but what are you going to do about it? I tell you what the Russians will do. They will do the same thing to French vessels whenever they're going to get a chance. Now, Here what happens about the Tomahawks. New voice of Ukraine. Putin threatens further escalation if Ukraine gets US Tomahawk missiles. What escalation? And this is what he says. Right here. A new stage would mark a new stage of escalation. Could Tomahawks harm us? Yes. We will shoot them down and improve our air defense system. I spoke about this every time they talked about the Tomahawks. Putin said, and I'm quoting, will it damage the Russia-US relations in which we finally see some light at the end of the tunnel? Of course it will. That's it, my friends. That means nothing else. Then we're going to shoot them down and the relationship will be harmed. Exactly what some want to be happening between the Russians and the Americans. So, that concludes my video, my friends. And many other points Putin made, obviously, over there. I think these were the main ones, and thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.